We're 2.5 years into doing interviews and so forth at this point, and every single interview I do, I learn something new. I learn how to talk to a guest, how to phrase a question, how to build up to the point of getting the answer I want from a guest.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It's your host, Adam Adams. And we are talking today with Jay Franze, who serves podcasters. He serves business owners. He serves people that are graduating college mostly and trying to move up the corporate ladder as fast as possible. And in and around that, for his company, they focus on branding you so that you can get those more opportunities. And I want to start here. His bio, by the way, is in the show notes. You know, we always put those bios in the show notes so you can learn more about that. One of the things is that he works with these younger people, right? They're graduating college. They might be middle management, and they're moving up the corporate ladder. They want to move up the corporate ladder. And the company supports you to do this in a couple of ways. They might help you write a book. They might help you do this other cool thing that helps get your brand out. But before we started recording, he said the main focus is podcasts. And I want to start there, Jay.
Sure.
Why, when you have all of these other opportunities to get somebody's brand out, why do you focus on podcasting? Is it more effective?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it. Podcasting to me is the most effective way currently for somebody to get a message out. And not only is it the most effective way of getting a message out, it's also the most effective way of building your personal brand. So I always think of a personal brand. People hear brand and think of a negative term, but I think of personal branding as building your reputation. Building a reputation, setting yourself up for success, developing yourself as an expert in some field or another.
Yeah, I agree. But does podcasting work faster than like a book? Or what's kind of the reason that even though you do all of it, you mentioned you kind of like podcasting is really where you put most of the focus, most of the time and energy? Yeah,
podcasting is a way to get somebody's personality out there. When you write a book, that helps and it builds an awful lot of credibility, but it doesn't get the individual's personality out there. So if we're trying to develop a person and trying to build a brand around a person, a podcast is a much easier way of doing that. It's more direct. You get to connect with your audience. You're able to get engaged and join in conversations. You can have them on your show. You can answer questions. So it's a much more engaging way than writing a book. Once you write a book, it ends up on a shelf, and if somebody buys it, that's great, but it doesn't give you that engagement.
So the podcast is more engaging. I'm writing this down, more engaging. And the reason I write it down is because I know I have one other question. I want to make sure we get back to that. And you wrote a book, right? You wrote a few books, and
yes,
the
sir.
most recently published one that the listener could find anywhere that podcasts or anywhere that books are found. Out of curiosity, is there an Audible version?
There is not at the moment, but we are putting one together as we speak.
So if you're listening, two things. My team will automatically have the Amazon link to the book in the show notes so you can buy that. It's generally an affiliate link. Anything that we do for Amazon or Audible, we want to make 10 cents off of it too. You won't pay any extra, but just FYI, those will probably be affiliate links, but you can also grab the book, Ideas of Leadership. Getting back to you, Jay, though, why it sounds like that the podcast is the most effective way, the easiest way to create more engagement, to let your listener, as you said before, know your personality compared to a book. But then you stated, then I realized, okay, he's definitely building up podcast. I'm not sure if he's poo-pooing books, but it's like, obviously you can't be because you just recently published your, I think the 4th book, right? Ideas of Leadership is?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So with that said, because I think this would be an interesting takeaway for the listener, if they're building their brand, to understand why did you also launch your book recently, your fourth book? And does it in some way work in conjunction with the podcast, either as a giveaway or maybe it's the top of the funnel and the readers are supposed to listen to the pod? I'm not sure. What do you think?
No, it's a great question. And I can spin it right back around. When we're talking to podcasters, what's the number one question you usually get?
When I'm talking to another podcaster, like what mic to use might be the most common one I get.
You get the technical questions, and then I typically follow up with how do I make money or how do I monetize my podcast? So
how do I grow my audience and how do I monetize? Those are two big ones. Yes.
Those are the big ones we typically get. And growing your audience it's easy to understand, but it takes a long time. It's easy to understand that it's engagement. You try to connect with an individual. You try to not only talk to them through the podcast. Like I said, you could bring them on your podcast, you chat with them. You can also engage with them offline or through social media. So that's the way to do engagement. But the way to monetize a podcast, to me, it's not about advertising. You make very little money through advertisements, very little. But if you have a book to sell, if you have a course, if you have some sort of service you can provide to your listenership, those are the type of things where you make money. But to me, I don't like to think of a podcast as solely about making money. I like to think of it as about the engagement part. That to me comes first. When you say, why am I writing a book or do I look down at writing the book? I think all of these things tie together. I think one should write a book, should have a podcast, and should do speaking engagements. I think those three things tie together to build one person's reputation and help them build their reputation, otherwise brand. And that helps them advance themselves individually as well as in their career. So when we work with clients to build themselves up and climb the corporate ladder, we also work with artists in the entertainment industry and help them design their brand to get it out to as many people as possible. Because again, to me, branding is much more than slapping a logo on something and calling it branded. It requires all of these steps. It's not just one piece, it's all of the pieces.
Yeah, that makes sense. To me, it's not about advertising. You make very little money, and then you went on to say you make very little money advertising. Where the money is made is in these other places. That was a really powerful soundbite, and I appreciate the thoughts and wisdom. But I am also curious because, like, for me, I have a company that serves podcasters. And so it's really easy for me to start a podcast that serves podcasters. And then I'm always serving a similar audience, growing the influence, having shareable content. I'm writing a book on podcasting also. So the listener will probably get to that soon. Hopefully it'll be done in a couple of months. But the point is, it's really easy for me to understand that when the person you serve, like in my case, most of my clients are business owners, small business owners, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs. They might have 20 or 30 employees, or maybe down to just themselves and an assistant. But for the most part, their thought process, most of them are not like, I want to monetize with sponsorship. Although I have a few clients that recently wanted to do that, and now they're making huge bank that way too. But they're mostly like, I want to build my influence to grow my business, my own personal business that I own and control. And I'm the head of it. I'm the CEO, the head washer, bottle washer, whatever. But it's to feed a company that I own. And in many cases, what I'm hearing you say is, that's all good too. But who you truly serve in your company is more like the younger person who might be graduating college, maybe their first, second, third, fourth year of a corporate business. They're still very young, and that growing their visibility, their brand, the content can have them move up the corporate ladder. If that's right, if I'm hearing you right, if I'm understanding it correctly, can you explain how that works for them? And if I'm not right, could you correct me?
Sure. Well, let's take one quick step back and you talk about your clients, and you're typically dealing with small business owners who are looking to put together podcasts in order to grow their business. What better way to grow a business than putting a face on it and giving that person a chance to engage with the CEO or the manager, or whoever is running the company, or whoever that face of that company is. So having a podcast is a great way. It's very similar to, we have social media where you have Twitter and you have all of these places where you can reach out and you can now type a message directly to somebody within an organization and get a response. It's no different here. We're putting a face on the organization. We're giving those people the opportunity to connect with the people they serve, their customers. So I think that's fantastic. And then I'm sorry for the direct question.
Well, follow up on that though. Just you said it can be good for the companies to have a face on the organization. And I want to make sure that I understand if this is like a small business like mine. So I've got 30 employees, 60 something clients that are podcasters, and just a very niche, small company that serves a few people. It's been a blessing and so fun to have a podcast because I definitely am able to monetize that time that I'm putting into a podcast with a lot of listeners that reach out. Okay, that's true. I guess my main question is, how does it work for somebody who wants to move up a corporate ladder? And part of their thing is, I'm not sure if it does, but the other part of that thing is, I'm not sure if it does because I've never worked in corporate. I've only served tables or bartended, and I've run my own businesses, and that's the only things that I've ever done in life. So never worked for a corporation or had to wear a suit to work myself. So I want to understand, let's just say somebody's 20 years old, 22 years old, they recently graduated college, and they're wanting to move up the corporate ladder. How does having a podcast help them?
No. Okay, that's perfect. Great question. So let me start by saying I worked in the entertainment industry for 30 years, 3 decades. I am old. And I've also worked in the security industry, which is more of the corporate side of things, where we provided security to those people in the entertainment industry, as well as tech companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook, those type of places. So I've worked on both sides of the fence, wearing the suit and tie, as you put it, and as well as going to work in jeans and a t-shirt. So I understand. But the way we move up is how we portray ourselves. So it's no different than anything else. The more likable you are, the easier it is to get along with people, the easier it is to climb the ladder, whether that be in the entertainment industry or in the corporate world. So you do have to understand the fundamentals of whatever business you're getting into, but people would rather take somebody they like and teach them how to expand the fundamentals than have somebody who's an expert at something that they don't like. So having some self-awareness, having some emotional intelligence, those type of things that will help you identify and be self-aware so you can talk to your manager. If you're talking to a supervisor, I always say they may have an open door policy, but that doesn't mean they want you to walk through their door at any time. So they're a busy person as well. So they might be putting together financial reports and so forth, and they don't want you to just barge in. But if you understand when they're busy and when they're not, and you approach them at the right times, so it's knowing all those things. So get back to the direct question of why putting a podcast together helps. That shows people, first of all, dedication. So it shows them that you're dedicated to your field and your craft. It shows them that you're willing to talk to other people who have that same interest, that same passion. It's giving people the opportunity to get to know you as a person and find out if you are truly likable and the person that they want to be around. And then it's showing them that you are developing yourself as an expert in that field. So the more engaged you get talking to not only your listeners, but to the other people in the industry, you're building a name for yourself. And it takes a while. It's not going to happen overnight, but it takes time. And then if you're not moving up in that organization, there's a very good chance you're going to connect with somebody else that you've been networking with this whole time and have a chance to move over to another organization and climb within that one.
Okay. Couple follow-ups. I got 3 main takeaways, a couple takeaways here. I want to understand more of the genre here in a minute about the podcasters, but I'm definitely seeing that this works really well with entertainment industry. And I would not be able to argue that at all. I am hearing that you believe that it works really well with the corporate industry. My concern would be some corporations and their rules that we can talk a little bit about here in a moment as well. Then these are the three takeaways. You said it's when you have a podcast, most likely in the genre or the field of your corporation that you are working for or wanting to work for, these are the three things. It is going to show your bosses, the company, that you are dedicated. You show up on time, you drop an episode like you do, Jay, on your podcast every single Monday and Wednesday. That shows something about you, your dedication. And so that's the first thing that this shows to our corporations, that we're dedicated. Number two was that we're willing to talk with others in the field. We're willing to sit down and enjoy a conversation about the field. That could help too. And the third one you said is it grows yourself as a person. They can see that you're trying to develop yourself in the field or as a person. So you're learning and growing. You've got a growth mindset. You are always learning. These can be some good benefits. What I'm wondering is, because I've had a lot, and when I say a lot, I'm saying maybe like 12 or 13 different potential clients that came to us, my team at Grow Your Show, to ask, I want to start a podcast, but one of the things that they had in common, let's say this is like 20% of the people that come and talk to us. It ends with, but I need to get approval by my company, even if it's out of the field, but especially if it's in the field of the company. My boss won't let me have a podcast. I've also heard I'm going to have to use a fictitious name. And this is true. This only happened once, but it is true. Not only am I going to have to use a fictitious first name, for example, but I'm going to have to use one of those microphones that changes my voice, a voice altering software, because I want to stay far away from it. Some of these people are engineers. Some of these people are doctors, and they want to start a podcast about real estate investing because they want to move toward that direction, but they're going to get in trouble doing it. Or they're a doctor and they want to do one about clean living, clean eating, not being wasteful, how medicinal mushrooms can benefit you, even though your doctor won't say it, whatever they want to start, right? But the question is, a lot of them feel like they aren't allowed to do it. So I'm wondering, like, do you only serve certain genres, or have you found a way around maybe 20% of people that absolutely are not allowed to have a podcast because they are doing a certain role?
I was taking some notes here. I want to make sure that we touch on some of these points. I help anybody that wants a show together. I'll help them put a show together. I'll help them do the entire package if they'd like. That, to me, it applies to just about anybody in any industry. Now, I've talked to doctors. I've talked to several. We've put together packages for other doctors. We just had a guest on who was from NASA. I've talked to people in the tech industry about putting shows together for them. And I've also had tech industry people on our show. We've had entertainment people on our show. We've had police officers who work in high crime areas that you would typically think wouldn't want to be exposed. And none of them had any issues with being on the show. The only one that ever had an issue was somebody from the CIA. And the only issue that they had was they couldn't talk about specifics of a case. They could get on and talk about their role. They can talk about what they do. They can talk about their field. They just couldn't reveal anything that had to do with a case.
Jay, can I clarify, if you're in your response, you're thinking, I'm asking if these people are a guest on a show or if they're launching their own podcast? Can you just let me know, like, which one you were responding to?
Well, I was mixing both.
Okay.
To me, everybody I've talked to about putting a show together, nobody's had any issues in any field.
Okay.
The only people who have had an issue in the field was the one person from the CIA that was a guest. So that person just couldn't talk about their individual cases. And then the other one that was a guest was, we just recently had a woman she was an engineer for NASA. She came on our show and it was a great conversation. She had no problem sharing just about anything, including parts of the spaceship. So it was a very good conversation. But all of our clients, the doctors, the tech companies, and the other industries, marketing industry and so forth, even people talking about their marketing campaigns, they have no problem putting together a show and discussing those topics. They just don't get into specifics of a client.
Yeah. So, for example, one of these people, Colin, he's one of those really well-paid salespeople for a big corporation, but they wouldn't let him have a podcast or a meetup group because they didn't want his face to be the face of anything. They just wanted him to work. And so there was some type of thing. And there's a bunch more that I don't think I can have a podcast. I might be able to go on a podcast, but I was like, I don't know. I've never worked in a corporation. I don't know what the rules are or why that would even be a problem. But
the only person that ever had to get approval to be on our show as a guest was somebody who worked for the state. So they were government officials. They had to get approval to discuss anything about that.
Yeah.
But nobody's even had to do that much for us. I can only stress the people I know and the people I work with. I've never been faced with anybody who had to get approval. Now, the one person you're discussing, I believe you said Colin, they might be able to put together a show, and you may have discussed this with them. I'm sure you did, but they may be able to put on a show that is not company related. Same industry. They may be able to talk about their field, just not about the organization. So that might be an approach.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, let's move on. And your podcast has been up for quite a while. You've got over 100 episodes. You've been publishing like 2 episodes a week on average because you do practically every Monday, every Wednesday, pretty much non-negotiable. And sometimes you do a Friday episode too. These are interview episodes. They are anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. And want to ask a couple of questions, see if we can get a little bit of support or feedback through this. One, what is something that you've learned recently, even though you serve some podcasters and you have over 100 episodes, but it has to be something you learned recently about podcasting. Either it could be a change or it could be what works or what doesn't, anything like that. But after having so much experience.
Sure. Let me start on the tech side. You can't see in front of me, but there's a massive amount of technology sitting here in front of me. And one thing that you can see is the microphone. Microphones, to me, being a new podcaster, you can start in any way. You can record on your phone. You can use earbuds. You can use USB microphones and so on and so forth. There's just so many options. But each microphone is specific. They have specific purposes. And if you learn what those purposes are and how they work, you can utilize them to your advantage. For example, this here is a dynamic microphone which rejects sound from behind it. It's a cardioid pattern, which is a heart-shaped pattern, which just picks up information from in front of it. So that's something that you really need to know. But a downfall to this microphone is it requires what they call a cloud lifter or a bump box, which is something that allows it to have more gain because it's not powerful enough on its own to provide the gain that you need. Another downfall is if you bump up that gain too much, then you end up with noise and hiss in the background. So there's pluses to this microphone, but there's negatives to the microphone. And as long as you know what they are, you can decide on your own whether or not you think that is an advantage or a disadvantage. So to me, what I learn is to try more than one microphone or try more than one piece of equipment to find out what your personal taste is. It's not that one is better than another and one is the be all and end all. It's that the things are different. For example, to my right is a Rodecaster Pro. Everybody's heard of it in our industry, and it's a very typical staple of podcasters. But TASCAM just came out with their model of it. Very, very similar box. And it's not that one is better than the other. It's the fact that you should try one versus the other and see which one you like better. And then there's handheld devices and so on. Technology can go on and on and on about which piece of equipment is better than another, which one you prefer over another. And then to me, we're 2.5 years into doing interviews and so forth at this point. And every single interview I do, I learn something new. So I learn how to talk to a guest, how to phrase a question, how to build up to the point of getting the answer I want from a guest. A lot of times I know the guest and I do a lot of research on my guest to try to figure out just what I want to get out of that guest. So I have to guide that conversation to get to that point. So I'm learning, just like everybody else, learning how to do that the best I can.
Yeah. How about this? You're talking about the microphones, and the Shure SM7B, which is the one in front of you, is, by the way, actually everything in your studio is on our little PDF. I'm looking at your studio. The listener won't be able to see, but we've got a place you go to growyourshow.com/PDF, and you can see like expensive microphones and even less expensive microphones, all of them vetted, and like the Rodecaster Pro that he was talking about as well. We'll have to make sure that the Shure SM7B link and Rodecaster link is in the show notes separately, but we'll make sure that /PDF, our website.com/PDF is there in case you just want to search for this stuff, look at it, experience it. But I'll say on a question for you, Jay, you've got this like mic that I know that is like $400 or $500 depending, and it's on a mic stand that's probably another 100 or so. And you've got the Rodecaster Pro, which I think is like $700. It's like maybe $699, I think is the price on it. But that's a lot of equipment. So here's the main question. If I didn't have that budget, what should I buy? And follow-up question is, if you had unlimited capital in your bank account, which none of us really truly do. We have a lot, maybe, but unlimited would be hard. Would you change your setup? So what would we get if we couldn't afford it? And if you could spend anything you wanted, what would you get?
All right, let's start with the beginner. Again, working in the audio industry for 30 years, I taught at the audio college, and I used to tell the students all the time, although gear is important and gear does matter, gear does not make the final piece. And the final piece is what you put into it as a person, the words that are coming out of your mouth. So that's what matters. So to me, first, focus on your questions, focus on the people you're talking to, focus on the value that you're providing. But then second, there are plenty of inexpensive options that are very killer options. So for example, think of the end in mind. What type of show are you going to be? Is it an interview show? Is it just a talking head style show? Or is it an on-location show? So let's think about the microphone first. You can get we're talking about Shure products. You can use their SM58s. You can use their 57s. The dynamic microphones that honestly, side by side to this one, are pretty much the same thing. And they're $100. You can use the Rode PodMic, $100. My co-host on our show, she was using a USB microphone. I asked her to go out and buy the PodMic, and she loves it. It's been fantastic. That's $100. You really don't need more than that. Like you said, are there more expensive options? Sure. This microphone's like $450, $500. The RE20 is about $100 more than that. So there are other options, but are they necessary? No. What I would recommend is to get a dynamic microphone versus a condenser microphone, only because most of us, especially beginners, are recording in non-ideal situations, meaning we are not recording in a treated room. We are recording where there's going to be outside noise. And a dynamic microphone will shield you from as much of that outside noise as possible, where a condenser microphone will pick up more of it. That's what it's designed to do. So as far as that goes, great. Then what are you going to record on? Most people will have a computer, laptop, something. You can just record on the hard drive of your laptop. You can use your built-in software. If you're a Mac user, you got software like GarageBand. You can, on a PC, you got a Audacity. And most people probably even have one or two more options than that. I have a Zoom H6, a little handheld recorder that I use when I go out in the field, but you can use that right here. Just sit down anywhere. I mean, I think that was maybe $250 for a recorder. I'd have to look up that price. And again, there's other options as well, competitors to that. And then really all you need is a microphone, a cable, and something to record it on. And then if you're going to go nuts, yes, you can use editing software and stuff. I tend to go nuts. I'm not going to lie to you. I like technology, and I like to go nuts because I don't only use it for myself. I use it for my clients. So I do have the Rodecaster Pro here. To me, that is the heart and soul of my podcast. However, I also use it to interface with my streaming. We do live streaming. Our episodes, our interview episodes, we record those live and we stream them live. So it goes out to all of our social media and so forth, but it does go through the Rodecaster. We use StreamYard, typical software that almost everybody uses to stream, but there are others as well. I also like Riverside FM. I like them for a different reason. I like doing my remote recordings with them because they record lossless audio, which is WAV files versus MP3s, meaning you get a higher quality. But it's working in more of a traditional double-ender style of a recording. And all that means is it's recording my recording on my host computer and it's recording my guest on their host computer. And then we download those files after the session's over. So I get high quality, where if we do it over the internet, we have the opportunity for dropout. So if you have a dropout, you just have to deal with that. Yeah. I can go on and on. Stop me whenever you want.
No, that's all really good. Here's a question, because we talked about you being, like, as we're recording, a little over 110, 111 episodes going. And curious what some of the things that you've learned recently was, I think we're talking about like sound quality and things like that. But I want to go way back to, let's just say, what was one of the first things you learned when you launched your podcast? Maybe especially if it's something that was like a huge like red flag that you're like, oh my gosh, that's way different than I ever expected. The listeners probably needs to know.
Oh no, we've had some very pitiful episodes. So, I mean, trust me, just like anybody else, when you're starting something new and you're trying to not only conduct an interview and research a guest, but worry about your gear and the stuff that's going on. And my system, it grows over time and I add things as I need it. I would be completely overwhelmed if you add it all at one time and then say, go. So yes, having the Rodecaster, I have a Stream Deck in front of me. I have lights here and so on and so forth. It's just more gear than you know what to do with. If you had all that right out of the gate, yes, you're more equipped, but you're less likely to be successful because you got too many things to focus on and you're not focusing on your guest. So yeah. I think at the very beginning, if you took the time to just focus on your guest and not the equipment, you'd probably be better off.
Okay. My takeaway, or the way that I see that when you talk about not trying to do it all at once, there's some saying about a man chasing two rabbits you won't catch either. You got all of these different fast things all moving at different directions at different times. It's like impossible to try to follow them both at the same time, but you could probably focus on just one rabbit, catch it, put it where you want, focus on the next rabbit, catch it, and be a lot more successful. And that's kind of the analogy that I see when you were talking right there. Why do you do, out of curiosity, and hopefully it's supportive to the listener, why have you chosen to do like every Monday, every Wednesday is almost always an interview episode? And when you do a solo episode, that's an additional episode on Fridays. So there are other options. There's never doing a solo, I pour into you lesson on a podcast. That's a possibility. Never do that, only do interviews. You could also go only interviews or only solo episodes and never have anyone else on the show and highlight them. Or you could do like a perfect hybrid, or like our podcast, it's every other. So in 1 week, they'll hear an even amount of solo episodes to these other episodes. But you guys have chosen, let's drop Mondays, Wednesdays. This will be an interview, 30, 60 minutes. And then sometimes on Friday, we'll do a bonus. Where does thinking come from there?
No, that's a great question, because it takes, like I'm sure you're aware, it takes a lot of thought, what works best. And you don't know until you try. So we tried a few things and we reached out to the listener and asked, what do you prefer? We do a lot of focus groups when we work with clients. These are not things we did at first. These are things we did once we realized we're trying to improve our own podcast. So we started randomly. We just interviewed a person and we just went as long as that conversation would go. If it was exciting, we'd keep it going. If it wasn't, we'd drop it sooner. And we started our shows with maybe some lighthearted banter. How are you? Hey, how you been? Because we have our co-hosts. So we talk to the co-hosts for 20 minutes before we even bring a guest on. And we realized, you know what? That's not valuable to the audience. The audience doesn't care what we did over the weekend. They want to know what the guest has to bring. So constantly tweaking that and tweaking it. And we feel like we finally found a formula that works for us. So what we do is we put on a live show every Wednesday night. We do it live and it's for 1 hour. And we record live 1 hour for the sole purpose that we can engage with our audience. Because it's live, we can take on questions. We can talk to the audience. We can make sure that we're truly engaged with them for a solid hour. And then we bring that guest on. We get to the guest within the first 3 or so minutes of the show. We introduce the show. We do all the typical stuff that you would do. We bring the guest on. We talk to them. We don't just ask questions, but we talk some sort of scenario-based piece as well. So, for example, if we have somebody who's in project management, we don't just bring them on and talk about project management or interview them, but we talk about some sort of case or case study with that person. So it's an interview style show followed by some sort of case study. And we've had success with that. Our guests like it. Our audience seems to like it. Well, a handful of people in the focus group said that there's more to it than that. For example, our titles. We all agonize over what we should title our shows or those type of things. And our guest interview titles are just the guest name because that's who we're featuring. But we have now gone ahead to do a follow-up show. So all of our interviews, they get released on a Monday, and then our follow-up show gets released on Wednesday. And that follow-up show is a lesson that we were able to pull from our live interview. So whatever lesson we think it is, it could be the top 3 ways of doing something, but what lesson we pulled from the show that myself and my co-host, Mindy Jo, we get together, we record that offline. It's not a live episode. We record it. We fly in some clips from the guests, things that we think were important that might need to be supported. And then we release that, and that's a half-hour episode. And then if somebody asks us something spearheaded that is just a direct question, it can be technology, it could be, what's the best microphone for us to use? What's the difference between this or that? Then we're going to we've started to record these. We've had a few things, what we called coaches corners, where Mindy and I would just get on and answer questions. But now we're recording some of these more pinpointed things where we can say, all right, we had a question, which is better, the SM7B or the RE20. These are our opinions on the two of them, and it's more of a teachable moment.
Okay. How long would those episodes be then?
5 minutes.
Cool. And so you might go up to like 3 a week. Out of curiosity, there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that their goal is only to be, I only want to or need to have 1 a week, or I've even heard every other week or even once a month, which personally, I don't even serve people like that. We only go weekly or more. But thinking about like you going to 3 a week, that would scare a lot of people. 2 a week, every week even could scare some people. So like, what made you make that decision to put out more content instead of just doing it once a week and making, quote, your life easier?
Again, good question. We were doing once a week interviews, and then we were approached by a company out of Las Vegas that wanted to do live interviews, not only live over the internet, but they want to do them over the television. And COVID messed that up, just like it messed about anything else up for everybody. So we decided, let's just go ahead and do it through the internet. We put together a YouTube channel and put it all together. So now we were doing these live interviews, and we were doing them once a week. We enjoyed them. We wanted to do more. So we started doing them twice a week. And like you said, it's overwhelming. I don't know how people need to understand, if you're going to put together an hour show, you're probably going to have to allow 4 hours worth of editing. It's just the way it is. It's just what happens. Unless you're going to release your raw interviews or your raw discussions or plans, it takes a while to do things. I won't say the right way, because there is really no right way. But if you feel the right way for you is to edit your shows, you need to allow time for that. And again, equipment and knowledge and so on and so forth. But we enjoy those type of things. But more importantly, as of the first of this year, we like to try things over a period of time, like say 6 months. We make a change and we do something different to our format. So starting this year, what we decided to do is, instead of doing 2 interviews a week, we decided to do the 1 interview and then do a follow-up and pull the lesson out of that interview, because that was more value to our listener versus doing 2 interviews. So that's why we changed it. And then the lesson piece is just something like we do YouTube shorts, just little clips. And people like that. So we've decided, okay, let's go ahead, and they say, why don't you do more of that? So now if somebody has a direct question for us, we will go ahead and answer it. And we take those direct questions. Sure, like many of your listeners, we use SpeakPipe. You can go on our website. You can ask a direct question. We'll answer it for you.
Yeah. All right. So that's how you get the questions. I think SpeakPipe needs to be in our show notes today. So if you are listening, you can scroll down and check out SpeakPipe. Based on like this old episode, I'm trying to think of the number, but it's probably just one of my very first episodes. It was called Questions Equal Content. And that was a really good takeaway that you mentioned, Jay. It's that you're using SpeakPipe to get more of these questions. I have only so far, because I'm not using that yet, had people reach out to me by email, or people reach out to me on social, or I might be running a discovery call, for example, with a potential client, and they'll ask a question. What I'll do is I'll take these questions that I get on social media or during a discovery call or on an email, and that's what I'll say, oh, you know what? I bet you a lot of people would ask the same question, or I've heard others ask this. Why don't I just create an episode about it? So there's a couple of benefits that I think we get from using questions as content. A, if we know that lots of people are asking the thing, then we know that the episode might be popular. Also, we could save some of our own time and energy over the course of months or years. Whereas somebody might ask us, how do you, let's say it's a real estate podcast, how do you find a good lender for buying a real estate investment? And I might get that so many times that I just record an episode where I give you the 10 tips to find a good lender. And then the next time somebody asks me a question, I'll say, oh, you know what? I've got an episode on that goes into all the detail. That'll probably help you because you'll have the entire thing right there in front of you. And now you're getting more people exposure. They're like, oh, I want the content, but I've never listened to a podcast, but now they are a podcast listener or whatever. So I love that takeaway about questions equal content. And I love the extra thing you said about using that tool that allows the listener to ask that question there. And then you'll go ahead and make an episode about it and release it on Friday. We're at that point. We're basically at the end of an hour and we both have our next appointments coming up. So I would love to have you back on the show at some point and we could talk more about tangible takeaways that how does the listener get to the next level? Your website, your link, anything you want to be connected is already in the show notes. And by the way, Jay, send that to me if you haven't. It's already in the show notes for the listener though. So go ahead and scroll down. You can connect with Jay. Check out his company. Check out his podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of three things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.